Welcome to the Scottish Watches podcast, now available in video when I can be arsed editing it. Turns out, editing video takes a lot longer than editing a podcast, and I am already editing a podcast, so I've just added 3 times the amount of work, quadruple the amount of work. But once the video is edited, probably a few days after the podcast goes out, you can check it out on YouTube. We will link it up on our Instagram, we will link it in the show notes, we will put it on the website, so you can follow along at home in the show notes in written format, where you can find links, videos, pictures, all the good stuff, technical spec if Mizio remembers to put it in, and there'll be a link to the YouTube video as well once that is available. Now, first thing we like to do in the show is get the wrist checks out the way. So Dave, you're going to go first this week because I always go first, and I think you're probably wearing something that listeners and the viewers will want to check out.
Will they? Well, if they listen to Monday's show, then they will probably not be surprised that I have pulled out my Ploprof. Here we go. So I have my titanium Ploprof.
That is a knuckle duster.
It is. It's maybe not quite as beautiful as the new blue edition, which actually is very nice. But this is the classic colourway, the black dial, the orange highlight on the lock pusher for the bezel, and the kind of black with a little orange hints in there on the bezel as well. I have currently got it in its summer guise, that being a blue and orange mixed rubber strap from Omega. There were 2 different straps that I've mixed together. And it has the titanium deployment clasp, which is not particularly svelte either, it has to be said. But
we're going with deployment now, not deployment like you were last time.
It's a deployment kind of week. Next week might be a deployment week. You know, we're just going to mix it up and go with it. And I've noticed, has anybody actually written in to complain yet? Because we've not heard about them if they have.
Probably, but I'm immune to the complaints now.
Oh, I mean, the complaints come in constantly anyway.
I'm like the guy on YouTube that goes around and gets himself stung and he's so immune to it, it just doesn't bother him anymore. I'm like that with the complaints about your pronunciations.
Well, it has to be said, you may be immune to that, but your favourite fast food sustenance, chicken nuggies. There was somebody I read about on social media today who's died from eating, I think it was 380 or 381 chicken nuggies, and he choked to death and died. And somebody in the comments underneath put, okay, so that means the safe limit's 1 less then. So I thought of you when I saw that.
I love how we've managed to totally derail the conversation within a couple of minutes. But anyway, back to your watch, Dave. You can tell us all about the deployment of the watch.
Well, we deploy the facts. Check out the show notes because there'll be much more actual real information on there. This is one of the last generations of the titanium ones. I believe there's still a small number floating about in the retail channels. But the recent release, part of the 75th anniversary, is in steel with a solid case back. This one, though, has the open case back. And if you manage to see the video that Ricky may or may not have edited, you can see on the video there the open case back with the sapphire crystal in there so you can see the movement. I really like it. It's light, the titanium, albeit it's not the lightest watch in the world, but this does certainly make it quite considerably lighter than the steel version, which makes it that bit more wearable. On the rubber, I find it very comfortable. We call it it's like a Milanese cum shark meshy type bracelet. It's almost like chainmail. It's that coarse in titanium as well. I don't find that the most comfortable, more because they're not super adjustable. They come in lots of different lengths and you have to find the combination that works the best.
Right, Dave, show me your length.
My length, we're on video, so we need to be careful now because we could probably have joked about that when it was only audio. But if I get my length out, it's a whole different type of channel on YouTube.
Yeah.
That's what I'm wearing. Check out the show notes for pictures and specifications. Ricky, what are you wearing?
Oh, I'm glad you asked. Well, it's not summery in Scotland anymore, unfortunately. I would love to report that it has reverted back to the way it was a couple of weeks ago, but it isn't. It's absolutely chronic out there. I'm trying to bring a little bit of sunshine. So I am wearing the Studio Underdog, the watermelon watch, the OG, the original one that came out a number of years ago. We actually had Richard on the show probably 6 months to a year after he first came on the scene. He gave us his history of how he used to work for one of the other watch brands. And we're not talking fashion watch, we're not talking luxury watches, we're talking those ultra cheap little watches for kids, ones with Darth Vader heads on them. Yeah, he was involved in all that kind of stuff, but he righted that wrong. He launched his own brand and he has been flying high ever since. He's done a number of limited edition releases Fantastic colour schemes, the workmanship that he puts into these watches, the way they're built. They're actually produced in the UK. The parts are obviously created elsewhere, but they're brought over to the UK for final assembly and QC, so there are never any problems that we've ever heard of his watches. This one today is the OG, as I mentioned, and I have got it on a Milanese shark mesh strap, a bit like Dave mentioned, because I wasn't too keen on the original. This is a fantastic 500 or there around about quid watch. It's got a seagull movement inside. We've spoken about it before at length on the show. Yes, it's made in China. So is your smartphone. Just because it's made overseas in a place that is renowned for having low-cost items plus low labour costs doesn't mean you're going to get a shitty result. There are many brands out there that are producing many good watches, including the guys at Sega Designed. They actually sent us a watch across end of last year, and that has ended up in Simona's watch box. Fantastic. They actually won an award last year at GPHG, or the year before, I can't even remember. But this one here, for around about £500, there or thereabouts, including VAT in the UK, you can't beat it. Lots of different iterations have come out since then, including, let me think, Reverse Panda. They did a Dick watch for last year's April Fools that actually turned into a real watch for charity. And Dave, have they got a watch coming out to do with our charity as well? Am I remembering that correct?
Well, when we say they've got a watch coming out, they have one watch coming out. That will be the only iteration of it that is coming out for, I think it's called Every Watch. Is that the name of it?
That's the one, yeah.
So, yes, if you wish to get your hands on an exclusive piece unique from Studio Underdog, and I'm actually trying to think if he's ever done any piece uniques before. He's certainly done one issue of a watch that I think he only made 2 of.
Was that the pumpkin?
That was the pumpkin, I believe. Yeah, he made one, didn't he, for the individual concerned, and the little, I think it was a girl, it was a young girl, I think, that designed it. She got one, and I think the other one went to auction for charity. So there was 2 of those. He has also previously done some very limited editions for charity, such as the Dick watch and a few others as well. But I
think it was actually called, maybe.
I think it was officially called the Aubergine. As we can tell, Dick watch, aubergine emoji, we know where we're going with this. But I think this might be, to date, his only piece unique that certainly I'm aware of. So yes, if you're interested, keep your eye out, keep your ears peeled, because we will be talking a lot more about that auction in the coming weeks. So we should talk about a brand that we have not talked about, I don't think, before on the podcast. That's being Artia, who are a Swiss, I think we'll call them an independent. I think it's fair to call them independent. A small brand, many of you probably won't have heard of. I didn't really know much about them until quite recently, but they seem to be specialising in watches that have sapphire crystal cases. And they're coming in at a price point that it's fair to say is a little under what you might expect a sapphire crystal cased watch to come in at. Maybe Hublot are one of the best known brands for doing these types of watches, typically coming in at the 50, 60,000 Swiss franc plus price points.
Oh, they used to be. I think they're a little bit more expensive now, going by what we saw at Watches and Wonders.
I think you might be right. I think they still have a couple in the range that are in that 50, 60,000, but certainly the sapphire case tourbillons are now into crazy 6-figure numbers. But this brand has a couple of sapphire case watches coming in at, I believe, 30,000 Swiss francs before taxes and 40,000 Swiss francs before taxes, depending exactly on the kind of configuration and or bezel material. It seems to be that's the main difference here. And these look super sharp, super good.
Blue is my colour. It is not something I shy away from. I could be doing with a blue sapphire watch. I remember seeing, I think it was the early Hublots, maybe 2017. I was across in Basel and I got to check out all the releases because they had them all in cabinets and display. And at first glance, I thought they looked a little bit plastic, a little bit like an ice watch, if you remember those fashion things from a few years back. But then when you get close, you realise, no, they're not plastic fantastic. They're actually made of solid sapphire crystal.
This is the Arta Aqua Saphir. I think the kind of name really does give a bit of a good idea as to the aesthetic of the watch, mixing water with sapphire, because it does have that kind of see-through water type effect to it as well. The aqua blue one with the white sapphire crystal, and it's got the kind of gradated dial going from that really aqua blue down into white, I think looks particularly sharp, and handily is coming in at the cheaper price point of just under 30,000 Swiss francs, which is still a lot of money, it has to be said, but that is a excellent looking watch. Nice size as well. I think it's round about the 40mm size, so very wearable. Many of the sapphire case watches I've seen up to this point tend to be slightly bigger, which maybe puts me off a little bit. But yeah, these are looking particularly sharp.
It's odd that this brand's been around for 13 years, and it hasn't really popped up in my radar before. I might have seen the watches, but the name doesn't stand out.
If I'm being honest, I don't think from memory I've ever seen one in real life. The brand name is something that I think I've possibly seen in passing, just maybe when you've been in Switzerland or you've been in Geneva and you maybe see an advert or you maybe see a window vitrine that's got something in it. It has a vague familiarity to me, but for sure it's not a brand that really floats around in my consciousness. The guy, though, who is behind this brand is Ivan Arpa, and he has a long history within the watch kind of making world, having worked for Hublot, Jacob & Co. and Baume & Mercier. And I think for sure you can definitely see where some of those influences have kind of given him a direction in terms of having his own brand. So I think for me, these are some of the more subtle sapphire-cased watches that I've seen. And, I'm not saying this watch is subtle by any stretch, but most sapphire watches tend to be... No,
it's certainly not subtle.
Yeah, but so many sapphire watches tend to be quite garish, and they decide they have to go for crazy faceted shapes just because you can. Whereas this definitely has much more of a vibe. For me, it's got a little bit of a vibe of a 50 Fathoms about it. The kind of shape of the bezel, shape of the case. It's got that little vibe about it a little bit to me, albeit obviously in sapphire, which it looks a lot more Bobby Dazzler. But compared to an Hublot, certainly more subtle.
Everything's more subtle than an Hublot. But you're right. I think what this reminds me of is perhaps some Seikos, but with the type of bezel that you sometimes now see where they print with an aluminium foil, then they put a glass sapphire over the top, and you get a different kind of look. It's a really cool looking watch. I doubt I'll ever get to see one, unless someone happens to be kicking around in Geneva when we go across in August. And if you are, let us know. We'd love to meet up. And you mentioned they've got another few releases out. They've got something in Only Watch, I believe, haven't they?
Yes, indeed. They have released a watch into the Only Watch auction, again, following the DNA and the style and aesthetic that we've just been talking about. But what they've done here is, interestingly, having been used to making sapphire cases have a Mohs hardness rating of 9, which pretty much puts it only really 2 materials are harder in it.
Glaswegians?
I mean, Glaswegians are hard, but you can definitely scrape them. I mean, I think that's fair to say. But the 2 materials that I'm aware of are diamond, which I think is 10. It's regarded as the highest in the scale.
Ron Jeremy, is he hard?
This is mossianite, which I believe also has a very similar hardness scale. It's a natural material to diamond, up there at pretty much 10 on the Mohs scale of hardness as well. This one, though, has got a dispersion index of twice that of diamonds, which means that it will play with the light unbelievably well. It sparkles with light. I can call it rainbow-esque. I don't even know how to really describe it. It's just the way light plays with it. You get all of these different colours coming through, and only the way really you can from something like that kind of crystal or that kind of natural material. Looks absolutely amazing. Yeah, definitely a win for me. I think you might quite like the case on their Only Watch option. Have you had a look at it?
Well, I'm kind of lost because going through the Only Watch website to see all the releases that are coming out, it's just incredible. And we didn't scratch the surface, no pun intended, when we talked about them on Monday. That's why we're covering a few more of them this time around. I got lost on the page. I actually quite liked the release, but it wasn't my favourite. As I mentioned, I had a few that I talked about the last time, and I've got a few more huckled down for this episode. So we should probably let people know what we're actually up to this week, because we are on our travels. We're heading into Glasgow. Not to meet any hard Glaswegians, but we're into Glasgow to actually meet a couple of watchmakers / watch designers, and they're going to take us on a journey that they're going to be offering to other people where they can personalise their own watch. Now, we've seen things like this before. There's many different companies up and down the UK, across the world, where you can buy a kit. You can have a coloured dial, you can have a movement, you get the case, the strap, the bracelet, whatever it is you want in a kit. You put it all together yourself, and you have made a watch, in inverted commas. With these guys, what you do is you go and meet them at their studio. Now, they're obviously coming up to see us because we can't be arsed getting on a train, but they're coming up to see us because we're nice guys as well. You go to their studio, you sit down with them, they go through things in your life that maybe you're interested in, and they take those designs and they come up with special touches to an existing model line that they offer. And we are going to be doing this tomorrow, almost like guinea pigs, horological guinea pigs, me and Dave, and we're going to report back exactly how the process worked out, because we've designed watches before. Both myself and Dave have in the past. We have done many limited editions through Scottish Watches. Dave, through Red Bar, has been involved in even more, from different price points, from Swatch at around about £100 right the way up to multiple thousands, if not tens of thousands, for these things that we've worked on in the past. This is completely different. It's not working with an entire company, an entire design team. It's a couple of guys based in the UK who have been running their own brand for a little while. And I'm not naming the name because you're going to have to tune into the next episode to find out how we went, and we'll reveal all. But Dave, you're going to actually get to be hands-on with a couple of people asking you some questions about watches instead of me asking you questions about watches.
Yeah, do you know, I've very much tried to not look at what they do, try to look too deeply into it, because I want to try and get a genuine experience of what it's like. You know, go along, see what they've got to say, see what they're going to ask me. I've tried to kind of keep my mind clear, not pre-think or pre-game it, and just really go in with a completely clean slate, see what they're offering, see what they're going to ask me, see what they're going to try and come up with, and then try not, I guess, influence it with premeditated thoughts about what I may or may not want to see, and then really then look forward to what the end result is. So I've tried to very much just, a bit like sometimes when we record the podcast, don't tell each other what we've done before we do the recording, because it just is much better fun if you tell the story the first time round. So I'm looking forward to how it's going to be, and it shouldn't be too long until we can tell the tale and we can physically show the results.
See, Dave's kind of stolen my idea with the show, and that is I like to do the gotcha moment. So I don't tell Dave nothing. I sometimes actually lead him up the garden path and give him red herrings. I like the Jerry Springer whole. You come out and you find out that your girlfriend used to be your dad or something like that. So yeah, so looking forward to that. We have also got a few other things we're doing this week. I am away to Munich for something or other. I'm not entirely sure what it is, but I will find out when I get to the airport. Apparently, this could be one of those situations where I wake up in a bathtub full of ice, missing my vital organs. That has happened before, and it took me a long time to find them on eBay. Dave, what are you up to? Have you got anything planned this week?
This week, aside from our little alluded to meeting with a watch brand that has yet to be named, what else have I got this week? I am, still unfortunately pegged down with work.
You're pegged, are you, Dave? I didn't know you were into that. Okay.
I mean, you've got to try everything before you know if you like it. So I will be also arranging a few things to do with Red Bar Global, because that is very much beginning to come together now. So there's a little bit of that going on, which we can't say too much about, but again, keep your eyes out. And a little bit that I didn't maybe mention was we and I have had a few people say, oh, I'd really like to come. Remember, you need to actually be a member of Red Bar if you want to come to the Global. So if you're not already a member, you should maybe consider getting signed up to your local group, whether that's Glasgow, London, Edinburgh, or wherever you are listening to this in the world. Because if you want to get potentially access to tickets, you need to be a member of Red Bar. So don't delay, get yourself signed up if you feel you might want to come to Edinburgh. So other than that, I don't have a huge amount on. I will look forward to seeing the tales of you probably being stuck at an airport somewhere for God knows how many hours. Many connecting flights have you got this time to get to Germany?
None, because when they sent me the list to pick from and they said get to London and we'll transfer you over, I said take me from Scotland. So they're actually flying me out from Edinburgh. Getting back home will be the difficult one, because apparently I'm going to be ending up in war-torn France, Paris. So that may be interesting for a little stopover. But fingers crossed, since I'm Glaswegian and I'm hard, I will get back in good time, be able to record a podcast, get that out for next week. But I'm looking forward to getting out of the country. It has been at least 30 days since the last time I had to stick myself in an airport. I have not looked forward to something less for a long time, but I'm sure once I get there, I'll be very happy about it. And I'm very happy about something else, Dave, because on a recent show, we spoke about Rolex, and they had a new Daytona release, the Le Mans edition. And I remember you saying to me on that show, and we do have it on record, so don't try and avoid it afterwards, You said it would probably be easier to get that watch than a normal Daytona, so I asked the question. I got in touch with a Rolex AD, and do you want to know what they said?
I'm going to guess they laughed rather than said anything.
After she finished laughing at you, not me, she said there is zero visibility on it, and the inquiries are already closed. So there is zero chance of anybody at all, unless you have got tremendous spend history with your AD or very deep pockets and bank accounts, getting a hold of that watch. So Dave, you were wrong.
So that sounds, again, like that classic, it's not a limited edition Rolex, but actually it's a limited edition Rolex.
Well, tell you something that's limited, that is also sought after, and hopefully they've got their act together this year, and that's the guys at Ming Watches. If you remember, they have released a whole ton of decent looking watches over the past few years, but they've hit the headlines because they don't really know, sometimes in the past, they don't really know how to sell watches properly, how to deliver watches properly, and how to do QC on watches properly, which has led to merriment and mirth across the internet in horological circles, including our friend Horological Dictionary, who always goes to town whenever there's an opportunity to talk about something being misaligned. Have you had a look at this new Ming yet, or is this news to you?
I have had a look, and I have to say I quite like this. I was quite a big fan of the early Mings, the really simple, time-only, basic, just with that really clean aesthetic. I was quite a big fan of them, quite small. The burgundy dial one, I particularly remember, really liked that. They've got a little more fancy, a little bit more abstract with some of the designs recently, and they've definitely got a very strong DNA. Pretty much every watch I've ever seen from Ming, you could tell immediately it was a Ming watch, that lug shape and the kind of generally the way they do the, well, it's not really a rehot ring, but the kind of markers or indices area.
Track?
Yeah, minute track, let's call it that. It's very much a design cue and design language of Ming. This one, which is the Ming 37.05 Series 2, I really like it. There's a couple of really nice little features in here. You've got, how should we put it? There's a moon phase, and then there are stars across the dial. But these stars are actually on 3 different levels. So they show colour or lume depending on what phase you're at in the moon or what time of day it is. So they kind of change and alter the dynamic of the dial so it looks a little bit alive, I guess would be a way to describe it. So I think that's quite a clever way they've done it. This one has a modified Solita movement in it. That being, and I can't remember, I think it's a 200 series, but it's not a straight SW200. It's one of the derivations of such that has the moon phase facility in there as well. Coming in at $5,000 US, which is beginning to get towards the punchier end of where you would expect to maybe see something slightly different movement-wise. But Ming has got lots of little features and touches in there that do make it very much a Ming watch. Launching it in the way they do usually, 500 pieces in this production run. When they launch it, you need to pay 50% upfront and 50% at point of delivery, or just before point of delivery, should I say. And I believe they are hoping to start to deliver them from the back end of 2023. So that classic Ming release model that I guess most folk who like Ming watches are used to by now. I like the look of it. Don't think I'd pay $5,000 US for it, but would probably quite like to see one in hand.
Okay, question time. Why would you not spend $5,000 on it? What's stopping you? And what would you spend $5,000 on from another independent? Because as much as I've just taken the piss right out of them because of what they've done in the past, I like their watches, I like the design, the styling of it. And this one with its skeletonized rotor and almost open work back end, and it was the SW288-1 you were looking for there. I don't see a problem with it. And $5,000 in this day and age where the price of watches has gone up and up and up. I recently spoke with Martin's of Glasgow, about the cost of Speedmasters. After somebody else on the show was talking about the cost of Speedmasters, and they used to be $3,500, $4,000, and now the cheapest one you get is about $7,000. So what's putting you off buying this one for $5,000, and what would you get instead?
For me, it's not so much about not finding it value for money, but I guess for me, a few years ago, this is a kind of watch that I would have immediately jumped at and thought, okay, I'm going to try and get one of those. Is it a value package? Yes. Ming has a great DNA and a great kind of look and identity to the brand. They do lots of work. And, you know, I'm not one of those guys who's going to say it's only a Solita movement. They've done a lot of work, whether it's been skeletonizing it, finishing it, etc. So I can't knock it for that. I just am at an area where I think it's almost too easy is the wrong words, but if you put 2 or 3 watches in at that price point, you could maybe have something maybe slightly higher up the kind of independent catalogue, whether that be maybe something from, say, Chapek or Moser. And that's much more where I'm at now, kind of thinking, don't be tempted by things like that and just take a breath and keep that money aside and then maybe have a bigger pot to play with something when it comes along. That's the reason why it's not for me. But if you're into Ming, this will sell out instantly. These 500 pieces, let's be honest, they're not going to hang about. Within probably, if an hour, they'll all be allocated, which is great for them. It's just for me, I'm not maybe as attracted to that type of product as I used to be.
The other things that attracted me were the look of it at night. The loom shots in this thing are incredible. I really like the playful Starry Night. I like the broken up minute track where instead of having the individual marker points coming through the tracks to show the minutes, it's a solid ring of luminescent material where it's broken up at the 5-minute intervals and then it has got almost a pentalobe at the 12 o'clock position. I like it. I really like it. The only thing I don't like with Ming watches is the fact that they ask for the dosh up front and also their case profile. I'm not quite into the way that it opens up at the lugs, moves down, and it's almost like a half hourglass kind of design. That one doesn't quite catch me, but the dials, that's what you fall in love with. It's always the face, and if I had $5,000 and had the opportunity, I probably would go for this. But is it maybe a case of that now that you're a more mature collector, your tastes have changed? And you're moving into saying, I'd rather consolidate or save up and take a bigger bundle of cash and put it into something else instead of there's $1,000 there, there's $5,000 there, there's $2,000 there.
I think probably for me, that's relatively a realistic interpretation of it. Funnily enough for you, I love, like you mentioned about the lugs and that kind of shape in the case. I love that. That's the one thing about Ming watches that I just adore. I love the shape of the lugs on there. It's just so nice. For me, it's got that silhouette of a hip, if that makes sense. It's that kind of, I find it quite a sensual shape. There you go, I said it, but it's got that kind of really nice curve to it. In terms of other things about the watch, I don't know why. I think for me, if I'd stayed as a diehard Ming collector, absolutely I'd be into this. I just am being drawn to those things as much as I used to be. But that said, it is an absolutely cracking watch. I think this is a hit for them. A couple of the releases they've had over the last year or so have been less so. You also mentioned about the paying up front thing. That I don't have as much of an issue with. It's difficult to fund a watch brand without doing the whole Kickstarter thing and things like that. So it is a way of them to help fund the business. Where I have more of a challenge with is if you want any chance of getting one of their watches, you've no option but to pay up front.
I will stop you there. I will butt in. I will ask. The unordained process, is that a case if you have to pay up front as well to get on their waiting list, or do you not?
Ultimately, if you have to hand any money over before you get a watch, I guess you're paying up front to some extent. But with unordained, what they do is they charge a small holding fee. And if memory serves me right, I think it's maybe a couple of £100. So it's maybe about 10% of the value of the watch. They brought that in simply as a means of, I guess, separating the wheat from the chaff. They had a huge waiting list, and it's easy to generate a waiting list of folks saying, yes, I want one. Quite often it's very different to then separate some of those individuals from money to actually commit to buy something when push comes to shove. So they've done it as a way of saying, okay, look, if you really want to definitely guarantee yourself one, when we get to a point where we can give you a definitive delivery slot, might still be many, many months, if not years in the future, we would like a holding deposit to hold that build slot for you. And for that, I don't have a great issue with the way they're doing it. I think for Ming, if there was going to be an option that after a given period you could buy them from stock, it gave people the option to just buy and receive, that would be different. But with them, if you don't pay half up front, you'll never see a Ming watch because they only ever build them in these small batches and they're typically all sold by pre-order, by pay up front, then they're gone. So, it works for them. Pretty much every release they've done, I believe, in the last X years has been successful and they've sold out. So from that point of view, it obviously works. There's enough people who don't mind doing it. I guess there's just other people who maybe would buy a Ming if you could buy it off the shelf, but that's not the way they operate their business.
Okay, my next question for you would be then, if you're not going to spend $5,000 on a Ming, would you spend $3,000 on a new Longines?
The answer, honestly, is probably no. And I think I know which model you're going to talk about, because one of my friends recently actually sent me a message.
Friends? One of your friends?
One of my friends. He has sent me a message to say, finally, they've done a watch that he's had an eye on for a long time, has never committed to it and never would, because it was only available, I think, in a 42mm, and they've finally done it in a 39mm. And this might be their Black Bay 58 moment, where so many people that like the look of a Black Bay in the bigger size but wouldn't buy it because it was a 41 or 43 if it was a bronze case. Suddenly they bring out a smaller one and everyone wants it that didn't want the bigger size. I think this is the Zulu time, I believe, that you're going to talk about, 39mm.
It is, and this is a watch that maybe I wouldn't have noticed so much a couple of weeks ago before I ended up in the Longines boutique in Glasgow, and I talked about it maybe a week ago there because I'd never been into their boutique, and it's a brand that you walk past when it's in one of the shops where there are a range of different makes and models laid out in front of you, and you're making a beeline for the new Omegas or the new Chanels or the whatever it is, depending what you're looking for, if it's for yourself, if it's for your partner. But Longines impressed me dramatically with what they had in their boutique. The different ranges of watches, they had driver's watches, they had not one-off pieces but limited edition runs with creators and artists that looked like jewellery, that looked like clothing mixed and matched in. And even recently, not Longines, but there was another, I think it was Jacob & Co. They did a special necklace piece for Rihanna that was paraded around in all the hoity-toity magazines and blogs and things. So yeah, this one caught me, but only because we've been speaking about Longines recently and I'd never really paid them attention, so I apologise, Longines.
Again, I think for me, Longines, along with Hamilton and a couple of other brands, funnily enough, Swatch Group brands, have always had a few watches that I've really liked. But
Certina,
yeah, but
Mido, those kind of guys.
Those guys, but less so because maybe it's some of the divers I like. But certainly from memory, a few watches within certainly Hamilton, a few watches within Longines have always been really nice, like the look of them, like the aesthetic, quite like the price points as well, but they're just too big. And finally, over the last year or so, both those brands seem to have caught on to this and have brought out these 37 to 39mm sized watches. And this Zulu time watch is a prime example of it. It's a watch I think that's been asking to be 39mm for a long time, pretty much since the 41mm or 42mm one came out. Great in-house Swatch Group movement in there as well. Nice long power reserve, all the kind of anti-magnetism and silicon technology that you could possibly want in a watch at this price point as well. Good looking, well put together ceramic insert on the bezel. Longines typically have really nice cases as a general rule as well. So I think this is a bit of a win. I think it comes in around about the $3,000 mark. So UK price point probably just tucking under the 3,000 mark, maybe the high 2,000s. Yep, a really nice viable alternative to something like a Tudor Black Bay 58, for example, which again is a lovely watch, but there's a lot of them out there, and it is a bit of the default go-to. This one, I believe, also has a GMT functionality on there as well and has a bi-directional 12-hour bezel on there. So yeah, if you're looking for something a little bit different at a pretty accessible price point that's got a real good spec, you couldn't go too far wrong with this watch.
I think you can make any watch GMT by putting a 24-hour bi-directional bezel on it, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, ultimately, yes, you can, but it has to have that bi-directional bezel on it. And there's still a lot of watches that play into the whole unidirectional bezel dive trope, shall we say. And how many people actually ever use a dive bezel? Almost nobody. Therefore,
you don't have to convince me, Dave. I know you're a buy guy.
Like we said, if you don't try things you don't know.
Of the people you know within watches, collectors, enthusiasts, right the way through to the people in the industry, how much does a couple of millimetre really matter on the wrist? do they really care that much? Because there used to be this thing a few years ago that, if only it came out in 38mm, I would buy it. And I thought that was just ludicrous.
I never really used to bother about case sizes at all. If I tried the watch on and I liked it on my wrist and it felt good, I was quite happy. I couldn't care less what size it actually was, what they claimed it was versus what it actually measured. None of that bothered me. And actually, to a certain extent, it doesn't really add any more. I think there's too many people get completely fixated by, if it doesn't say 38, I'm not interested because I'm a 38 kind of guy, or whatever other size it may happen to be. And I think for me, watches are like shoes. I know roughly what shoe size I am, but too many times I've gone and picked a pair of shoes off the shelf that are my size, put them on and thought it's either too big or it's too small. I had to buy a smaller or a bigger size because actually when I put it on, it was comfy. Watches for me are the same thing. So I completely get the point you're trying to make there, which is true. Although there's watches that could be smaller than they are. But I think there's still some brands are stuck in this kind of world of a bigger watch on the wrist, and there's no need for it. Funnily enough, I have some Black Bays in the bigger size and the smaller size, and I have to say, I definitely now prefer the smaller size, but maybe again, that's just a personal thing. But that wouldn't stop me wearing a bigger watch. Speedmasters, all of those watches, they're all over 40mm, so that proves a point. The Pro Prof I've got on today is significantly over that size. So I think for me, it's just more about, is it wearable? Is it comfy? End of story.
Yeah, I've played this game on a few people where they've said things to me like, I wouldn't wear a big, massive watch, and I've perhaps got my Apollo 8 on. And I say, oh yeah, I agree with you totally. You try this on, and then they try it on, but because it's black and it's ceramic and it's lightweight and it's manual and it's thin, they put it on and go, yeah, that's really nice. That's really nice. And I'm like, it's about 80mm. I think you just have to try it on. People get fixated with the numbers, and it's all about how it feels on the wrist. And there are some watches that are even smaller that they wear fantastically well. And it just depends. Again, it depends on the setting, what you're up to, what you're going to be doing. I've got a couple of Nodus that are around about the 37, 38mm, and I think that is kind of the limit. Going further down the way, when it starts to disappear on the wrist, that's when the game's a bogey. But people get fixated on bezel diameter versus lug to lug, and there's some watches that have got crazy sized faces, dials and bezels, but the lug to lug is manageable.
Exactly, and it also sometimes depends if the lug is, I guess, a feature of the watch. And a good example for me is Grand Seiko and the GS44, the 44GS case. That kind of faceted lug for me is just, it is archetypally Grand Seiko, and it just, the minute you see it, you know what it is. But actually it makes the watch really big, and most of their cases are, I think, 40mm officially, but those lugs are huge. They're flat and they're long and they're wide, and they make the watch look much bigger. And they're, I think, 36.5mm or 37mm releases they brought out last year in that case shape do not wear like a 37mm. They wear like most people's 39, 40mm because of those big lugs. So, as you say, you just have to try them on. Don't get past what the bit of paper says, what the catalogue says, what the website says. Go try it on. Love it, hate it, but try it on before you make a decision.
Well, it was when I was in Glasgow and I went to the Longines boutique that I got this interest, this renewed passion for a brand that I hadn't really paid much attention to. But a brand that obviously I really like is Rolex. We've talked about it in the show many times before. I own a couple. Dave, I think, still owns one. I'm not sure if he's still got it. But I spotted a £500,000 Rolex in a second-hand emporium down at the Argyle Arcade. And it wasn't just myself that spotted this. It turns out this is a bit of a landmark in Glasgow for watch enthusiasts who pop over and check out the sights and sounds, because once I talked about it in the podcast, a gentleman actually appeared in our Facebook group. And that's a quick plug for you guys to join our Facebook group. If you're on Facebook, jump on there, join, we will let you in. Just follow the rules. Don't muck about too much, we will let you in. You can join the conversation. We do lots of pictures, we do lots of catch-ups, there's comments on the different shows, suggestions we take from there as well. But somebody else had spotted this watch and they'd actually gone into Porter's to buy something at the same time.
Indeed, this was Steve McDonnell, who went into the Argyle Arcade in Glasgow to have a look around, and he took a picture of the said expensive Rolex and put it into the Scottish Watches Facebook group. But whilst he was in there, he popped into our friends at James Porter, and he picked up a Zin, I believe a U50 SDR, which is a slightly more unusual variant of the U50 and a very, very nice watch, it has to be said. So congratulations on that. Very good choice.
And Simon, who is the son, no, he's not. He's not even the son. He's like the great-great-great-grandson of James Porter.
He is the 5th generation of the Porter family to be running the business.
He was actually in the newspaper. I don't know if you spotted this as well. He popped it up on his Facebook account and I had a look. So he got a nice little spread in the Glasgow Herald a few days ago there. So props to Simon and the team down at James Porter & Son. A great place we can't say enough good things about. They've been instrumental in helping Scottish watches get off the ground and continue over the last few years. And they have got all the brands that we talk about. It's almost as if we talk about something in the show and then within a couple of months, they appear there. They've had in Anne Ordain, Fears, Studio Underdog, lots of brands that you don't see in the high street, you don't see in boutiques. They're predominantly online only, and it's really good to be able to walk into a genuine premises, try the wristwatch on, see how it feels, see how it wears, and then if you like it, buy it or put your name down if they're out of stock. So big shout out there for James Porter & Son. Now we should probably talk about some other Only Watch releases, and there's one that caught my eye. I didn't talk about it last time, I wanted to keep it until just now because this is one of the reasons I'm heading across on my travels this week. I'm going to see the guys at Karl F. Bucherer because they've got some stuff to show me. They've got something they've shown the world recently, and that is a big black clock on the wrist. But it's got a tourbillon in the wrong place, Dave. What do you think of this? Is this going to upset you? Is this going to push you over the edge?
So I have to say, I've got a little bit of a soft spot for the brand Karl F. Bucherer. I was at an event not that long ago. I think it was maybe about 2 months ago in London. It was one of the Red Bar Londons, and it was at Bucherer, the retailer brand namesake of this brand. And they had a couple of the guys from Karl F. Bucherer at the event, some of their watchmakers and some of their designers. And, there's a real proper heritage and history to this brand that, I think not many people realise the kind of depth of knowledge and understanding of watchmaking that they do actually have. And they have their own in-house tourbillon. Not sure whether it's totally my thing. I love the fact they've done the bridges of the tourbillon in green and it's kind of punchy and it stands out. And for somebody who makes a big point of saying he doesn't like dials being cut out, because this whole watch is black, it's a carbon case, it's a black dial, it's a black strap, everything about it's black, just with this punchy, colourful tourbillon kind of shining through. It's one of the few that I'm going to give a pass and say, this is quite cool. It's a really nice aesthetic. Yeah, I shouldn't be saying it because I'm meant to be sticking to my guns about not liking holes in dials.
We're getting you, aren't we? We're finally getting you.
Getting me in the same ways I will get you with a certain Girard Perregaux brand. But yes, it's an interesting mix using kind of high-end carbon case, etc., with that really traditional tourbillon movement in there as well. I quite like it. Have to say, quite like it. And I think this is one that's going to go for quite a lot more than the projected number, which I believe they're projecting between 60 and 100,000 Swiss francs. I wouldn't be surprised if this goes for quite a lot more.
I brought it up because I like it. I like it a lot. And I have a tourbillon from the brand that I will name, Harage. But I like this. I love the fact it's got a peripheral rotor as well. So the automatic winding system does not inhibit the view through the clear case back. You get to see everything. It's got black bridge work, plating, everything in there. As you mentioned, the tourbillon's actually held in space almost. I think I would pick it up and put it on upside down though, because it's black, you can't really tell what's going on, and you expect the tourbillon to be down at the 6 o'clock position.
And I guess, ultimately looking at it from the pictures, if you were to wear it upside down, as long as you set the time right, you could probably carry it off because it's quite symmetrical in terms of case shape. And, there's no numbers or Roman numerals or anything of that ilk on the dial. You've got effectively 3 indices or appliques at the correct weight, 3, 6, and 9. But I'm sure you could probably wear it upside down and get away with it. The only thing is, it does say Karl F. Bucherer on the dial, and that would be upside down. So there would be your giveaway.
That is a point I didn't actually think about, Dave, so thanks for pointing that out. Not saying I was wrong or anything like that, because I don't admit fault. That's what a lawyer always tells me. Next up, we have got a Maurice Lacroix. Another brand that I absolutely adore, I do have one of their watches, I wear it quite a bit. Had it for a couple of years now in the collection, and when it was nice and summery a couple of weeks ago, it was out and about with me. Bronze case, looks almost gold, doesn't tarnish like most bronze cases either, so I absolutely love it. This one here is a masterpiece release, and as you mentioned in the last show, Only Watch this year is all about differences, different colours, the spectrum, the hues, everything playing together. Some of the brands have taken that on board and interpreted it in a way where they've involved almost the entire spectrum of the rainbow, the full gamut of colours that are available. The guys at Maurice Lacroix have definitely done this. They've incorporated into their bridge work, into their minute track. Even the casing has got some kind of, it looks like Damascus steel to me. I don't know much about it. I literally went through the pictures, picked some of my favourites from looks alone, didn't look at spec, didn't look at details, and thought, you know what, I'm going to drag them on the show, going to discuss them here, because if anyone knows anything about these watches, Dave will know about these watches.
So I'm going to say straight up, this watch is one of the nicest releases so far announced for Only Watch. This, as you mentioned, is one of their masterpiece. This is the Maurice Lacroix Masterpiece Only Watch. Now, anything that says manufacturer from Maurice Lacroix means it has got their in-house movement. This one with the ML330 movement. I believe this is the first time that Maurice Lacroix with one of their in-house movements have skeletonized the movement, and they have done a fairly substantial job, it has to be said, of skeletonizing it with plenty of material removed. They have also, for the first time, done a sapphire case. Now, it just works, this watch, 43mm, but because you've got this clear sapphire case, in a way it almost disappears. The case almost doesn't exist. It's got that transparency to it that doesn't give you the bulk or perceptional weight that you get from metal or a DLC plating or titanium or carbon. So it just brings everything in, and it almost makes that skeletonized movement look like it's just floating in space. You've got that classic offset, so maybe offset to round about 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, the little subdial, which is where you read the time from. You've got the big balance down at the kind of 6, 7, 8 o'clock area on the dial, and you've got the little running sub-second sitting directly underneath the main area that tells the time, sitting up at that 1, 2 o'clock area. For the fact that this has managed to incorporate every single colour in the palette of colours that have been suggested for Only Watch, it could easily have become like looking toyish or plasticky or a bit tacky. But I think they've managed to incorporate all these colours in a way that still has produced a really classy looking watch with quite a strong punch of colour to it as well. I think this is a fantastic looking watch, to the point where I believe they are expecting it to attain something in the region of 25 to 35,000 Swiss francs, which is a lot of money. But for a sapphire-cased, in-house manufacturer movement watch that's only piece unique and it's been skeletonized, I'm going to put it out there and say, if that was available in the market at 25, 30,000 Swiss francs, I would be sorely tempted. That's the kind of watch that I would be buying these days if I had the option on one, which I don't. And also, to be fair, had a spare 30 grand hanging about at the moment, which at this point I do not. But I think this is an absolute stunner.
I don't generally like this iteration from Maurice Lacroix because it's a very elegant and classy look, but the skeletonization and the way that you can see all the innards, I never really thought that worked in the models that were out before. On this one, it definitely works. With the sapphire case, it's a double win. And it reminds me of a couple of releases from maybe Zenith. Was it the Pantone edition that they had in their Defy 21? It's like that, but even executed better. And I think it's because the colours aren't just simple colours. There's gradations in the work. It's almost like burnt titanium when you used to see the flame tip exhaust on motorcycles and cars 10, 15 years ago. The way that it would go from silver to blue and then go into almost like a purple and then an orange. You've got that coloration throughout the entire watch, and the sapphire on it just adds to the effect. So this is a complete win. It's one I didn't expect I'd be talking about in the show, but I'm glad that I gave it a second look and we're discussing it today.
100%. I think it's a brand that's likely to slip under the radar when it comes to Only Watch because there's so many illustrious old school brands out there that are pushing watches through, or these high end independents that sometimes some of the brands might have fear of being lost. But it shows you when you go that extra little step and you do something super special, hopefully you'll get the limelight. And I really do hope that this attains a high figure because it truly deserves it.
We actually got to spend some time with their CEO, Stefan, last year because we ended up down at Mahindra Racing for a launch of another watch that they'd brought out, a different iteration. It was the Pontus and a few other things that they had fettled with. And we were really happy to meet him in real life and to check out some of the other releases that they'd done. And they partner with some great people. We will link to that episode in the show notes, so if you've not heard that one or you want to revisit it, because it's always good to go back and listen to stories. And I think that's probably all the time we have got for this episode of the show. There are just so many amazing, I think it was 63 releases came out for Only Watch. Then you had the Tudors, then you had all the Omegas for 75th, and then you had some of the watches we've spoken about today. Generally, July historically has been a quiet month for releases. People are on holiday. I believe in Switzerland, folks in the factories, they actually take time off and things close down July, August time. Is that right?
The watchmakers tend to all disappear on holiday at the same time, which is why sometimes there are some delays in watches coming out the factories at this time of year.
I like how I just have to double check things with Dave because my memory is not so good after long COVID happening to me. But anyway, that is the end of a show. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Scottish Watches. We're approaching the 30,000 follower mark, which is really good for us because we only started about 4.5 years ago. People have been in there for 10 years. They are up at hundreds of thousands because first mover advantage. We came late to the game, but we're doing our best. Everything is organic. We've got great posts on there. Miziel, Philologus, Mark, Ralph, all the folks that are on the team, they're always in there creating posts, talking about new watches. Same on the website. If you want to get included in the community, you could write an article, you could write a review, you could talk about your opinion on something or other. It could be collecting, it could be waiting lists. Whatever you decide you want to have a chat about, drop us an email, do not DM us, use the contact form on the website, get in touch. And as we always say, follow along at home, check out the show notes, that's where all the links, the pictures, the Instagram reels, the YouTube videos, everything will be included in there of all the watches we've spoken about if Mizio remembers to do it this time on time.
Indeed.
So that's the end of the show. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to catch us Mondays and Thursdays. Generally Mondays are where we talk about new releases, unless there are 60 plus of them to chat about, and then we'll move it into the Thursday as well. Thursdays is generally when we bring on a collector, an enthusiast, a founder, a CEO, or somebody that knows a lot about watches from a brand. It could be big, it could be small, it could be an independent, it could be a Kickstarter. So definitely follow us in your podcast player. Subscribe on YouTube if the videos are out yet. Who knows? I might get around to that sometime. And that is it. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you guys again soon.